Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. This episode is the one I have looked forward to the least, and it's really hard for me to talk about. I have actually been diagnosed with PTSD because of this experience. I will not go into everything that happened with it, but I will give you bullet points because it is part of my story and I think it's important. Here we go. I had just left the doctor with zoloft and dexamethasone instead of prednisone and Plaquenil, and that was what he wanted me on to help with my lupus symptoms. He scheduled me for a 1-month follow-up. I went home and I stopped sleeping. I would sleep maybe 45 minutes to 2 hours a night, but it was one of those things where I would wake up and I would be up. My dexamethasone did wonderful things to my body. I felt better than I had felt ever, especially on the prednisone. I did not feel the same. I dropped any water weight that I had gained through the prednisone like that. It was so quick. I went down to like 118 like I had been because anything I had gained since then had just been water weight. I had been struggling with depression and chronic pain for so long that suddenly with the Zoloft and the dexamethasone, I didn't have depression and I didn't have chronic pain. I felt great. I was really excited about that. My brain had been all but dormant for the previous months. With the dexamethasone and Zoloft together, my brain went into high gear. I had ideas like I had never had them before, and I was just so excited about everything. I felt intelligent and smart, and I'm already like a really philosophical person, but it like went into high gear. Like I was very philosophical. Everything was beautiful and hopeful and comforting for the first time in ever, maybe. I felt like it was a spiritual awakening, and it was for me. Like I felt closer to God and the universe than I ever had, and I felt like all of these things that I had been going through were meant for me, were meant to be part of this bigger, beautiful story. And I was so excited to be on the path that I was on. My mom used to talk in verses when I was younger. If she had a point to make, she would back it up with a Bible verse pretty immediately. I would hear those verses in my head to describe anything that I was seeing. And I would think about all the different things that these verses could describe. And I had also studied a lot of religions over the past years. And I would kind of connect the dots where I would be like, oh, this religion says this, and that's very close to Christianity, which also says this. And then, Judaism says this about that. And I was very excited about all this stuff. And I became very obsessed with religion in those few days following the change in medication. I became hypersensitive to vibes. So I could feel energy coming off of things like I never could before. It was almost scary, like it was almost creepy. Again, exciting. Like I wasn't in the headspace to be creeped out at all. I was just excited about everything that I was experiencing. Again, I was not sleeping and my brain was in high gear, and so I was looking up the effects of not being able to sleep. And so I printed off this article, and I think it was like a 45-page article. I went downstairs, all the pages had come off of the printer tray and they were just printing all over the ground. It reminded me of this scene in Homeland where Carrie has become manic and Saul comes in and there's papers all over the floor. Mania is a side effect of any antidepressant. My grandmother had bipolar disorder, manic bipolar, where she would experience mania as just part of her symptoms. It clicked for me, and I went from absolute joy and elation to a nosedive of just being scared, and I was crying, and my husband was sleeping at the time, and I went and I woke him up, and I said, I'm manic. You have to help me. And he goes, I don't know what mania is. So I had him look it up on the computer, and while he was reading it, I called my brother. And my brother is like my best friend in the world. I called him and I was crying and I was like, I think I'm manic. And he was just like, it is what it is. Like it's not going to change anything in the long run. Like, we just figure it out. We figure out the next thing. And he's like, in the meantime, don't let it freak you out. Like, just kind of, steer into the skid, like see what happens. And so after that, I called my sister. She offered to come to drive down to be with me. That was a big relief for me, just to have somebody there other than my husband. He was reading this thing about mania, and he was saying that he didn't get it and he didn't understand it. So when my sister came down, we tried to go to sleep again. And at this point, I think it was past midnight. I was laying there, eyes wide open, and I realized that all of these spiritual awakening symptoms that I had been having were hallucinations. And like that, with that realization, the hallucinations went from very benevolent hallucinations where everything was for me and everything was like a gift to me, to very scary hallucinations, like I was the only one not there. They were physical hallucinations, auditory. I had ringing in the ears really bad, where I felt like it was angels speaking to me. It just got scary fast. And so my sister said, okay, well, you guys need to go to the ER at this point. I had been calling my doctor and he wasn't really picking up, and it was hard for me to get a hold of him because, he was just a primary care doctor. Well, we went to the ER doctor. She's one of my favorite ER doctors, and I've been to the ER so many times that I can actually say she's one of my favorite ER doctors because I had her probably 4 times when I went in. She was absolutely amazing, and she was just like, we need to talk to your primary care doctor who prescribed you all these things. So she called him on his cell phone, which I did not have, but she did. And she, told him the situation. And the problem is that I seemed sane. And I could feel myself slipping. But since I seemed so sane, since I was able to speak correctly and my words were organized and my thoughts were organized, she didn't really believe me, and my husband didn't either. It was really scary for me because I could tell what I felt like on the inside, but on the outside was not reflecting that, and I just seemed like a kind of hyper version of good old Tori. So she gave me sleeping pills to help with the sleep deprivation. She thought that was probably the only thing that needed to be fixed. And once the steroids decreased and the antidepressants decreased, I would be able to return to a normal state of conscious awareness. I went home and I took sleeping pills, and I think it was probably 3 or 4 a.m. and my husband had to go to work the next day. I went into the guest room. I told him before he went to sleep, I remember begging him, don't help me if this gets bad. You gotta help me. But we had already done all we could with going to the ER, and now it's just time to follow medical instructions. That is really the last thing I remember clearly. I have blurs and flash memories of everything that happened after that. It was not mania, it was steroid psychosis, because I was on such a high dose for so long and had such a high level of sleep deprivation. Zoloft didn't help the situation. It was just not a good combination for me. I remember flashes after that. I remember Ryan having a hard time. That's my husband. I remember sitting in the basement with a demon in front of me on the wall. We were just staring each other down. I remember my siblings coming to pick me up to take me to the hospital again. I remember being admitted. I remember different beliefs, which were so real to me at the time that it's hard to even explain. They were very real things. And then I remember waking up in the psych ward. I was in the psych ward for 8 days after that. I remember someone trying to get me to eat. I remember not being able to speak correctly. They had put me on risperidone, which is antipsychotic. I felt like everything was slow. Come to find out later, they had taken me off of all steroids and all zoloft. So my body was snapping back from all that as well. I will at some point talk about my experience in the psych ward, but that is going to be another video for another time. I eventually evened out to the place to go back home, and I was on risperidone for another couple of months after that to even me out, and I was weaned off of that. My primary care doctor did not want to put me on any more steroids because I had had that experience with psychosis. That was my experience with high-dose steroids, antidepressant, and the psych ward. That's another reason why I'm doing this YouTube channel, was because I looked up everything after that to look up dexamethasone or psychosis or anything like that to see someone go through something like this. And y'all, there's hardly anything out there. It's like people who suffer from this as a chronic thing, and then also people who have never suffered from it, but they're researching it. I felt like there were very few resources for people who had it as like a one-off. That is another reason why I'm telling my story. I want people to know that it happens and it's out there, and it doesn't mean that this is a chronic issue or that it will necessarily ever happen again. But given the right combination of both biological and chemical factors, it is a very real thing that can happen to the human brain. That's where I'm going to leave you guys today. Thank you guys for watching so much. I really appreciate each and every one of you. Yeah, leave me a comment. Tell me how you're doing. Bye.